Welcome to the office. Well, the piece is complete, and despite my somewhat pessimistic analysis when I was making it, it actually came out kind of good. It had a little bit more trapped air than I would like, but unless you look at it with, magnification or a microscope or something, if you just look at it with eyeballs, it looks pretty good. It looks fine. So, as I usually do at the end of a project, it's time for analysis and review, and just to think about, well, what went right, what went wrong, and what are the areas that could be improved. Starting with the equipment, the NQALHA is performing really, really well. I can't really imagine too much future development on the basic machine. I think the basic machine works well, and the problems that I'm facing now, I have occasional minor shipping damage, and I'm working on packaging solutions and possibly some design modification to the machine to address that, but most of them arrive safely. I am future research. I've got ideas for more precisely controlling the speed of the glass, the rotation speed of the glass, using a closed-loop feedback system involving some sort of a mark on the glass and an optical encoder to allow synchronization of a left and right side. But that's far future. I don't know, far future. It's hard to say what the far future is. That's future R&D that I have no idea when I'm going to get around to. The squeezer is working very well. There is a little bit of deflection as I stand on the pedal to try to get that last little bit of squeeze out of glass that's stiffening as I squeeze. I see a little bit of deflection in some of the parts, and so the next version I'm going to move up from a 15 millimeter ball bearing linear ball bearing from a let me do that again. I'm going to move up from a 15 millimeter linear ball bearing to a 20 millimeter linear ball bearing, and just look at some of the shapes and look at some of the forces and see if I can figure out how to make the thing a little bit more rigid. Trying to make it perfectly rigid, well, perfect doesn't exist, and trying to determine, well, when is it rigid enough? Well, it's rigid enough in the form it's in. It deflects a little, but hey, that might be okay. The lap wheel is working well for an early prototype, given all of its limitations. I am starting to develop some ideas for the next generation of lap wheel and wet saw, but mostly the early prototypes are working pretty well. So overall, in the equipment, I'm fairly happy. And now on to the glasswork. This is the third version of the design that I've made, and the first version came out pretty nice, and I showed the process of making it in one of my previous video series, and it ended up in a sculpture that I'm showing now. The second one came out very nice. I made some changes, made a little bit of evolution of the design. The second one came out pretty nice. I did not video any of its construction, partly because I was busy doing other things and just found a little time here and there to make pieces and a little time here and there to put it together. One of the pieces will go into a sculpture, and actually two of the pieces have been sent to other glassworkers to see what they can do with them. On this particular one, I believe that I'm going to get 4 pieces out of it, and I'm thinking of making a rather large sculpture, probably prominently featuring the wood instead of the metal. Still don't have a design yet, but I'm working on it. So now on to the problems. Well, actually, not quite onto the problems yet. The rod stack method of producing Bullseye Marine appears to be working well. And yes, there's always room for improvement. There's always room for perfection, but it appears to be working at least reasonably well. The wad up on the end of the rod and stripe and flatten into a rectangle appears to be working reasonably well. Of course, like everything that I do, it's not perfect, but it looks like it's working pretty darn good. And yes, is there room for improvement? Of course, there's always room for improvement. The weakest part of the design, as I've said over and over again, the weakest part of the process and the biggest gap in my skill and knowledge is assembling all of the pieces together, getting them to stick together. And it's like, I think I need to talk to an expert. I think I need to practice more. I think I need to take a lesson or 2 or 3 or 4. But the basic difficulty that's going on here, if I try to heat them up hot enough to stick, sometimes I end up tagging them a little bit off and the assembly doesn't go as accurately as I'd like. I don't quite have the skill to just tag it perfectly first time because, my hand wiggles a little and it's just hard to do. If I try assembling it kind of like when it's cold enough to adjust and then try to get the torch in between the 2 pieces, try to get the torch in there to get it hot enough, well, sometimes I don't get it hot enough, and sometimes the little irregularities on the surfaces end up trapping air, and sometimes it ends up trapping a giant air bubble that's really shocking and very disappointing. So, got to work on that. But as I've been saying throughout this entire project, it's all R&D, it's all discovery, it's all an adventure. This is an amazing adventure that I've started down the road to becoming a glassworker and an inventor of glassworking machinery, and hey, no boring retirement for me. So I will probably, I don't know if I should say probably, I may do videos showing the construction of the sculpture, depending on if I think they'll be interesting and if I think I have the time to do it and if I want to go through the effort of doing it. I will almost certainly show the final result of the sculpture when it's complete. But for now, this is the end of the project, this particular project, and came out pretty good. So I'm kind of almost happy, but one thing about perfectionists, and I've noticed this in pretty much every expert that I've ever worked with, whether it's an artist, musician, machinist, scientist, engineer, your ability to criticize your work advances faster than your ability to do the work. And even the best of the best that I've ever worked with will show me exactly where all the mistakes are and apologize for, well, that wasn't quite right. No, yeah, I could have done better. And my wife says, why are you so hard on yourself? And I say, well, that's how I get better. That's how we all get better. So, thank you for watching. It's been fun.